before all this extra money started putting in, and scores were actually growing faster before they received the several $100 million more in funding.
What do you think and I don't know if you would have any idea, but why do you think that is?
Well, for one thing, they were growing from a lower level, so you will see some higher percentage gains. It's not about the money. It's about how you educate kids. It's about how you understand what their needs are of the individual students. I mean, for example, we throw a lot of money at risk, and that's because of the federal guidelines. That is, we should be looking at risks. The definition of at risk should be the students who aren't scoring as well. Those students, for one reason or another, are struggling more than those with higher test scores. It shouldn't be based on how much income a family makes. It should be based on what that student's actually achieving. And so redirecting some of the money. It's just not about spending more money. And also what we found when we looked at those in that Volume 3 you talked about, we not only found these tremendous disparities between total amount per pupil spent, we broke those numbers down by individual cost centers. There's 13 cost centers, so instruction is just one. We looked at administration. There's 3 different kinds of administration. There's food service. As I said, 13 different cost centers. We found remarkable differences in the cost per pupil, sometimes as low a low end of $59 per pupil to a high of over $2,500 per pupil to theoretically perform the same function.
How do we get people to fundamentally change how they look at it?
I think the first thing we need to do is have the study that has never been done, and that is to determine, using efficiency, what do schools need to operate to achieve the outcomes that they're required, to achieve the certain achievement levels, but to do so in a cost-effective manner. Last year, as I said, there's never been a study, and legislative post-audit is the one that says there has never been this kind of a study. They went out, the 2010 Commission asked the legislative post-audit to do a 2-phase study last year. The first one, they studied per pupil spending. Their methodology was different from the one we used, but that's what they were doing, looking at how schools spend money and looking for opportunities. Their report concluded that there are tremendous opportunities for schools to do the same things they're doing, but spend less money in doing it by learning from the best practices of other districts. They listed 80 things that schools could do to achieve the same outcomes but spend less money. Now, the second phase of that audit was to send those auditors into the school districts to help individual districts learn how to save money. School districts rejected that. They resoundingly rejected that. They convinced the 2010 Commission not to let auditors in because they did not want help in finding how to save money.
And why do you... And that's the part I have such a difficult time understanding, because I would imagine that the districts want this help. That's what's so difficult for me to grasp, that school boards would want to embrace this and say, how can we you've got ideas on how we can educate our children better, and it will be less money so that we don't have to battle this every single year or go back to our local base of taxpayers and say we need to do this. Why is it they're opposed to it?
Because they want higher taxes. Because they want to see. Spending on schools from 2005 to 2009 increased 32%.
32%.
32%. Even after the cutbacks they received, they're still spending double-digit increases. Big increases are going into schools from 5 years ago. Schools want, and they believe that they are underfunded. And if they were to say we could bring in auditors and help us learn how to save money, it undermines their request for higher taxes.
And what it would actually do, if they brought in the auditors and they looked at what they were doing and got an understanding of it, it may actually bolster their case to why they need more money in certain areas if that were actually the concern.
That's certainly possible.
Speaking with Dave Trabert, he's the president of the Kansas Policy Institute today. I want to shift gears away from education and back to, again, the state of Kansas still doesn't recognize that we're in the worst economic calamity in generations. They are still looking at sales tax. They are looking at tobacco tax. They're looking at any tax increase they can because of the budget shortfall, as they term it, not overspending. The numbers came in over the weekend, another 10% down in our incoming revenue to the state of Kansas. The idea of raising taxes is on the front burner, and now everyone's falling in love with it. Dave, why are they wrong?
Well, first of all, a tax increase, both studies on the impact of tax increases conclude that it will put thousands more Kansans out of work.
Right. The Wichita State said that it was in 2011, the only year that the study looked at, that it would put people out of work, but not raising taxes would put more people out of work. They both would put people out of work.
But that's not exactly true. We talked to Dr. Wong, and what his study, first of all, there's two things. His study was, he was asked to look at what would be the impact of reducing government spending by $350 million. No one is talking about reducing government spending. In fact, the governor's budget and the Senate budget both dramatically increase government spending. No one's ever talked about cutting government spending. They've talked about trying to hold spending. Does it make sense that we should be increasing? I mean, the governor wants to increase state spending by almost $400 million. That is the reason that we have a budget gap, and that is why they want to raise taxes so they can spend $400 million more. The other thing about Dr. Wong's study is that, and he told us this, we're not interpreting, he told our staff, and it's on kansaswatchdog.org, you can read the study. Dr. Wong said that his computer model assumes that a certain percentage reduction in state spending would result in the same percentage reduction in government jobs. That's just an assumption, and it's clearly not what would be the practical application.
You may cut back in a number of areas that may not actually be jobs.
Exactly. And in fact, what he said, hey, if there are ways that you can reduce spending to offset the revenue loss and do it in ways that don't cost jobs, well, then by all means, you should go do that. And there are dozens of ways to do that. Governor Parkinson issued a challenge to us a few weeks ago. He said, look, it was on video on the Wichita Eagle website. He said, if Kansas Policy Institute thinks there's a way to do it, to balance this budget, to fund state programs at the current year level without a tax increase, I'd like to see it.